Every year around Halloween, we are treated to an outpouring of what could only be described as scare literature, telling us about how the holiday is satanic and evil and should not be celebrated by Christians. These opinions are backed up by some rather unusual and very frightening fantasies masquerading as historical facts. The following videos are not intended to address whether or not Satan exists, nor to show that witches are nice granola-eating vegetarians and tree huggers who wouldn't harm a fly. Nor is it an attack on fundamentalist Christians, but rather a discussion concerning some of the so-called facts offered in some anti-Halloween publications.
Michele Blake wrote a very popular article entitled 10 Reasons I Kissed Halloween Goodbye. It was responded to by Yuriy, Stasyik and Ouellette. In this series we will go over each reason Blake gave.
3. Don't dine with demons. Samhain was the one day of the year when the dead were allowed to come back into the world and commune with the living. People traditionally set a spot for the dead at their table, inviting them in. Since there was also the possibility that evil spirits would come looking for them, people took to guising themselves for protection. In other words, it's okay to dine with demons, as long as you wear a costume to protect yourself.
People traditionally set a spot for the dead at their table, inviting them in. It's okay to dine with demons. What? Where did you get that? What does that prove? Yes, some historians say Samhain included leaving a plate hour in honor of dead ancestors. This is practiced by neo-pagan Celtic reconstructionists today. But where do demons come in? Is Blake seriously arguing that dead ancestors are demons? So my grandfather who passed away is now a demon. These celebrations are certainly not Halloween. The neo-pagans who celebrate Samhain, in order to be historically accurate, celebrate Samhain on the date of first frost. Not necessarily on October 31st. Why in the world do these neo-pagans choose a different date and a different name for their holiday if it's really Halloween? Blake asserts that guising is dining with demons. Yes, guising was a medieval superstition, there is no debate about that. However, it is a Christian superstition, not an ancient pagan superstition. Blake is totally ignorant of the simple historic fact the whole point of the silly medieval Christian superstitious of guising was to ward off evil spirits, not to invite them in for dinner. Superstitious medieval Christians did other superstitious things, like hang garlic to protect against vampires. Can we argue that hanging garlic is inviting in demons? No, it's merely a silly superstition.
You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. 1 Corinthians 10:21. So are we really supping with demons?
Blake introduces 1 Corinthians 10:21, and rips the text out of context. Yes, the passage does speak about Christians refusing to worship other gods while they worship God. However, that same passage concludes by allowing Christians to eat food sacrificed to idols, arguing that even if one person does an action to worship an idol, and a Christian does the same action to God, he is free to do so. Turns out this chapter, as a whole, actually supports Christian liberty to celebrate Halloween, as long as it's not unto Satan. Furthermore, 1 Corinthians 10:21 specifically refers to those who willingly and knowingly serve and worship idols and pagan gods. I would wager that Blake and everyone else will be hard-pressed to find even one Christian who willingly and knowingly serves specific pagan gods. This passage is therefore useless in the context of the secular holiday. However, it is useful in showing the extent of Christian liberty does allow Halloween celebrations. She calls up the fact that during the Samhain festival people believed that their dead relatives in spirit form would come up and dine with them for dinner. She comments about how dining was a very important and intimate thing in the Bible, and then she quotes 1 Corinthians 10:21. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. But she doesn't go far enough into the context. For not much further Paul writes, Eat anything sold in the meat market in Corinth. All meat sold in the marketplace was first sacrificed to pagan idols, and everyone in Corinth knew it without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. Verses 25 to 26. Some people felt that eating meat sacrificed to pagans made it inherently evil. For that reason Paul tells the Christians not to eat the meat with them. But not for their own sake, because, hey, sacrificed to idol or not, it's just meat, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. But for the conscious sake of the other person. On a side note, I'd also point out that I don't know anybody today who sets a plate for the spirits of their dead relatives at the table on Halloween. That practice died out when Christians began to celebrate Halloween. So her point number 3 is moot anyways.
Sharing food with someone represents a sacred connection.
Sharing food with someone represents a sacred connection. In the ancient Near East culture, certainly. However, the fact that I just had lunch with a coworker doesn't mean I have a sacred connection. We are no longer in the ancient Near East. In any sense, who shares a meal on Halloween? Do druids show up and eat from my plates? No. Does Satan show up for pizza? No. A bunch of neighboring kids show up for candy, which is hardly a meal, that's it.
Adam and Eve first ate with God in the garden, but then chose to share an apple without God in the presence of Satan. Jesus spent much of his time on earth dining with sinners, because that is who he came to save. The last thing Jesus did, before he was crucified, was to share a meal with his disciples, and he commands us to continue remembering him in that way until he comes again. When we see him in heaven, it will be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. Revelation 3:20. Satan is the world's greatest counterfeiter, so he tempts us to sit at his table and join his festivity by making it as attractive as he can.
Satan is the world's greatest counterfeiter, so he tempts us to sit at his table and join his feast. Blake makes many rhetorically pointed statements, however, does almost nothing to prove these statements. She assumes they are true, and hopes her readers will as well. I'm sorry, speculation is not evidence. Convince me, I am open and waiting. Blake stated that Satan makes Halloween as attractive as he can. Oh really? Did she not just tell us that Halloween is evil, because it is so obviously unattractive? Did she not say that it's all about witches and ghosts and fear and death? Haunted houses, Hollywood movies, even neighborhood patios are graced with blood and dead bodies and axe murderers. Is she saying all of that is now attractive to her? Which one is it? Is Halloween all dark and scary, or is it attractive? You can't have both.
He knows we won't say no if his festival looks like pure evil, so he's let us create our own G-rated version that we aren't as likely to resist.
Satan knows we won't say no if his festival looks like pure evil, so he's let us create our own G-rated version that we aren't as likely to resist. Here she contradicts herself again. Earlier on in the article, she argued that Halloween is evil, because everyone can clearly see it's evil. A circular argument, by the way. Again, she changes her mind, and says the reason it doesn't appear evil, is because Satan is tricking us on purpose. It seems Blake is willing to invent any explanation for any evidence presented, provided it fits with her preconceived feelings.
But God says, for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God. 2 Corinthians 6:14-16.
Finally we see 2 Corinthians 6:14-16, which is surprise. Out of context for this discussion. Blake uses the Bible passage most commonly used to warn Christians to avoid marrying non-believers. However, in 2 Corinthians 6:15, there is a specific mention of the Greek name Belial, which is used as a reference to Satan. Paul is saying Christians should not merge with those who worship Satan. By this Blake implies that everyone who celebrates Halloween worships Satan and we should not join. Is this true? Do trick-or-treaters worship Satan? Does Billy Graham who celebrates Halloween worship Satan? No. This is a ridiculous accusation not grounded in reality.